Morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. My name is Sena Segbetsi, and I am the coordinator of the OECD Champion Mayors for Inclusive Growth Initiative. Thank you for participating in the 15th edition of the SHS webinar series, co-organized by the Social and Human Sciences sector of UNESCO and the OECD Center for Entrepreneurship, SMEs, Regions, and Cities. The SHS webinar's objective is to shed light on the visceral forms of discrimination that exist in our societies and present actions of solidarity and assistance to vulnerable populations conducted by cities. This episode is all about racial equality and inclusion and will feature speakers from UNESCO's International Coalition of Inclusive and Sustainable Cities, ICCAR, and the OECD Champion Mayors Initiative for Inclusive Growth. And before we begin, I'd like to share a little bit of background about these coalitions. The OECD Champion Mayors Initiative is a global coalition of over 60 mayors who have made inclusive growth and the fight against inequality a policy priority. Over the past 4 years, the initiative has strived to share best practices from cities around the world to fight all types of inequalities at the local level. UNESCO's International Coalition of Inclusive and Sustainable Cities, the ICCAR, is a city-level platform that undertakes a wide range of initiatives, from policymaking and capacity building to awareness raising. It advocates for global solidarity and collaboration to promote inclusive urban development free from all forms of discrimination. If you'd like to learn more about these coalitions or how your mayors can get involved, we invite you to reach out to us via social media or on our website. Today's discussion will explore how cities are leading the way in fighting discrimination and exclusion in a world living with COVID-19, with a focus on the economic and social dimensions of leaving no one behind. But first, a little bit of housekeeping. If you're having any technical issues, please use the Q&A box available on the screen to address it to our organizers. Also, this is intended to be as interactive as possible, a webinar. So please, throughout the discussion, please address questions to the speakers by sending them through the same Q&A box, and we'll try and get to them at the end of the discussion. So over the next hour, we will be hearing from local leaders about how their mayors are taking action to fight racism, discrimination, and exclusion in 2 cities that are leading the way on this front: Bristol in the UK and Vienna in Austria. We have today with us Councillor Asher Craig, Deputy Mayor of Bristol, and Shams Zasadi, Human Rights Commissioner from the City of Vienna. At the end, we will be hearing remarks from Magnus Magnuson, Director of Partnerships and Outreach of the Social and Human Sciences section at UNESCO. I'd like to thank them all and you all for joining us today. At the end of the presentations and the closing remarks, we'll have a section open for Q&As where we'll have gathered all your questions to ask and engage our speakers. So throughout the presentation, please feel free to use this space. Before we get to our presentation, I'd like to do a brief scene setting. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated inequalities, discrimination, and marginalization. Population groups that were already facing difficulties related to health, well-being, and environmental and socioeconomic inequities have seen disproportionate rates of COVID-19 infection, hospitalization, and death. In the United Kingdom, social-economic disadvantaged groups has put Black people and ethnic minorities at risk of COVID-19. Data from the UK Statistics Office show that Black people in the UK are 4 times more likely to die of COVID. In the United States, Latino and African American residents have been 3 times as likely to become infected as their white neighbors, according to federal data. And Black and Latino people have been twice as likely to die from the virus as white people. The disparities are a likely result of a few and multiple factors that work together, including overcrowding of the housing situation, environmental risks, long-standing disparities in health and inequitable access to medical care, and of course, economic inequalities, with higher representation of racial and ethnic minorities in jobs that are at risk, that carry a higher risk of contact with COVID, including the transport, health, and sanitation sectors. OECD research has also shown that spatial concentration and segregation of minorities and lower income earners contributes to an access divide and has negative impacts and constraints, constraining access to education and impacting work outcomes for these populations. Lack of transit and connections between minority neighborhoods and jobs can hinder opportunities and drive inequality for certain populations living in certain neighborhoods as well. At the same time as dealing with this outbreak, discrimination in various forms, racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic, are resurfacing in these challenging times. In the last months, global outrage has amplified the voices of thousands of citizens marching for the Black Lives Matter movement in different cities around the world, while appealing for equal access to economic, social, and environmental justice, as well as health equity, political representation, civil and human rights. At the outset of the pandemic, the movement, I Am Not a Virus, emerged as a protest against racist acts toward populations of Asian origin. Local leaders have a critical role to play in promoting racial equality by improving welfare, empowering disadvantaged individuals, and addressing inequality to ensure that all citizens have the same power to shape their society. Today, we are lucky enough to hear from our guests to learn how they are tackling discrimination to move towards more inclusive societies in their cities by engaging with ethnic minority groups, marginalized people, and impoverished communities. Without further ado, let me introduce you to our first speaker, Councillor Asher Craig, who is the Deputy Mayor of Bristol in charge with communities, equalities, and public health. Since 2017, Asher was asked to step in the role of Deputy Mayor of Communities, bringing into and elevating the issue of public health within her portfolio. She is committed to addressing the inequities and multi-level public health risks, the impact diverse urban populations through the lens of racial and ethnic health disparities at all levels. Councillor Asher Craig, I give you the floor.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for inviting me to give a presentation on the work that we're doing here in Bristol. I mean, many of you will, who are listening in or watching in will have known that Bristol has been at the forefront of quite a bit of activity over the last few months. But our journey did not begin at the toppling of the statue on June the 7th. this has been a long road for the city, and I'm just going to give you a flavour of some of the work that we have been doing, particularly since our administration came into power in 2016. Next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of an overview, I think you need to understand that, you know, the Bristol context. So we're the 10th largest city in the UK. We have over 463,000 people who make up our citizens. Over 22% of our population are non-white British or from Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. As you can see, we have over 45 religions. We speak over 91 languages. The citizens make up 187 countries of birth. We have the 4th highest population of Somali-born communities here in the UK. But one of the things I would say is that we are a city that is quite divided, and we often talk about the tale of two cities. But next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in relation to partnership working for us here in the city is the only way that we are going to get things done. For us, it was also the only way where we can promote racial equality and tackle it at a local level together. It is not in the gift of the local authority alone to address issues of race inequality or any of the wicked issues that our cities face. And so back in 2016-17, the mayor established something called the One City approach, and I'll talk about that shortly. But here are some examples of the partnership working that we have done over the past few years. So in 2018, we established a Bristol Equality Charter. It's a citywide initiative that we co-produced with over 20 private, public and voluntary sector organisations. I understand now that we have nearly 200 signatories, and that Equality Charter sets out quite clearly for all of our organisations, the types of organisations we want to be and how we will behave and how we will address equality right across the piece. We have provided toolkits, and as a result of that, we now have established the Bristol Equality Network, which meets on a quarterly basis. We've got HR directors and equality leads who work together and share best practice. So we're kind of like linking up the city. What we've tried to do is avoid the silo working and the silo mentality that has resulted in no real progress around this issue for decades. And so we're trying to eliminate that. In 2019, in November 2019, we organised a national conference called Race in the City, Tackling Race Equality. That conference, again, was very well attended. I think we had up to 300 people who attended that conference. And it was a national conference, and it was an opportunity for Bristol to display warts and all, the good, the bad, and the ugly of race inequality. And many of the initiatives, programs, and organizations had an opportunity to step up and talk through some of the challenges that they were facing, we are facing as organizations. And we had speakers from the judiciary, the Chief Constable from Avon and Somerset Police, because what you need to understand is we've been taking, the city is on a journey, and we've been taking the city on a journey, including the many leaders who lead the key organisations across our municipality. Something else that we have that's quite unique is the Bristol Race Equality Strategic Leaders Group. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's a group of 17 leaders, chief executives and chairs of the 17 largest public sector organisations in the city. We meet on a quarterly basis. And again, that work came out of, in 2015, the Runnymede Trust, which is a race equality think tank, produced a report that, that told us that Bristol was the 7th worst city in the UK when it comes to race inequality. And that was a statistic that everyone in the city couldn't stomach. And so in 2016, the Race Equality Strategic Leaders Group, so what came out of that report was we stood up a manifesto for Race Equality Leaders Group, and that it came back with a number of actions that we wanted the public sector to take. And this was put in place before I actually became a politician. But it has been led by the local authority. It has the NHS, the health. It has the probation services, criminal justice system, and what we have done over the last 2-3 years is we've done something that no other city has done, and we've actually produced a warts and all race data product where each of those organisations have laid bare their data on race. So looking at staffing, looking at sickness levels, and the disparity that shows up time and time again across all of our organisations. And I think for some it was really very difficult because they were laying bare how bad things really were in terms of where Black, Asian and minority ethnic people were in their organisations. But it has acted as a base from which to move forward. And so each of the organisations have agreed action plans, and they report back on their progress on a quarterly basis. We then have COVID-19, and you heard from our opening, the chair, about the impact that COVID has had, particularly on Black and African Caribbean communities, 4 times more likely to end up with COVID. And so whilst the UK government was working on their own piece of research and looking at the impact of COVID, the Mayor and I asked to have a rapid review that was completed on the impact of COVID on Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. As a result of that work that was done and the research and the findings, we have now stood up a Race Equality COVID-19 steering group, which I now chair. And we have now nearly 80 stakeholders from across the city who are engaged in this process. And many of them appear and reappear across many of our partner structures. But what's important is the community. Our communities are very much involved and engaged in taking the actions that we have agreed to address the impact of COVID-19 on our communities. And then finally, we have a Race Equality Education Group, another group that again links into our learning and skills learning city partnership here in the city. And again, it's looking at race inequality in education, because we have poor educational outcomes for particularly Caribbean black young men. Yeah, the attainment levels are just not, we're just not shifting the dial on attainment, and we have a lot of work that needs to be done, and also increasing, looking at how we can increase the recruitment in the city. Next slide, please. So we have something in Bristol called Bristol's One City Approach. It was an idea that was formulated by the mayor back in 2016. And as I said before, you know, for the many wicked issues that all of our cities have to address, the local authority alone cannot address it. So when it comes to the Bristol One City Approach, it brings together hundreds of key partners across the city, and we, over a painstaking period of about 18 months, we produce something called the One City Plan. which creates a vision of freedom from racism, prejudice, and looks at inclusive and how we become an inclusive and sustainable city that will resolve many of the social fractures and inequalities. And we've aimed that we want to get to that place by 2050. There are a number of strategic drivers within the city for this our approach. First was the death of Bijan Ibrahimi, who was he was a tenant of Bristol City Council, and he was murdered by his neighbour following a period of racial harassment. The findings of the review that came out following his death found the local authority wanting, and our mayor made it quite clear that Bristol City Council, as the report showed, was an institutionally racist organisation, and we could have done more to potentially have avoided the death of of Mr. Ibrahimi. We then had the Runnymede report, as I mentioned earlier, A City Divided, which clearly showed that Bristol was punching way below its weight. And as I pointed out, as diverse as our city is, yet we're the 7th worst city when it comes to race inequality indicators, when it comes to education, employment, housing, you name it, we come out worse on those indicators. And then we, as an administration, when we arrived in the local authority, we found the organisation wanting, and so we asked for an independent review of equality and our diversity function here in the local authority. I am really proud to say that, you know, as difficult as it was for many to be part of that process, we have committed to standing up and reinforcing our equality and inclusion team by employing a new head of service. We published an equality, inclusion policy and strategy in 2018, which we just refreshed and took to full council, and in line with COVID-19, Black Lives Matter. We've got new definitions and best practice approaches, and we also have set out an action plan that addresses specifically race equality, which includes a very extensive race equality toolkit, which we've rolled out to all of our staff in the organisation. Next, please. So the Commission on Race Equality, we have a Women's Commission here in the city that was established in 2015, and we felt it was really important to establish and stand up the Commission on Race Equality. It's called the Mayoral Commission on Race Equality, and the vision for the Commission is that Black, Asian and minority ethnic people feel valued and empowered to fulfill their potential. Again, we have representatives from a number of organisations who make up the commissioners, and we're actually going through a process of appointing new commissioners. I was this morning just interviewing a number of potential applicants for that post. So the commissioners are very independent, and they will take up their seat in October for a period of 3 years. The Commission recognises the divergent experiences of the different Black, Asian and minority ethnic groups and factors of intersectionality. So we're concentrating our areas of effort around education, employment, leadership, health, housing, justice and policing. These are the areas where Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities are overrepresented and underperforming. We appointed a new chair 4 or 5 months ago, Professor Olivette Otelli, who is our new Professor of Slavery at the University of Bristol. And we've gone on to win awards for what has been an amazing new leadership program, which we've called Stepping Up, where we have recruited over 140 diverse leaders, predominantly from Black, Asian and minority ethnic backgrounds, because again, we were finding that Black people particularly were being stuck at middle management or lower levels, team manager level, and we needed to address the issue of enabling the city to open up itself to new, more diverse leaders. And so that has been a huge success, with over 60, nearly 70% of those of our cohort actually stepping up into leadership roles, and that includes becoming magistrates, becoming non-exec directors of boards, maybe stepping up into senior roles within their own organisation, even just becoming a governor on their local school. And finally, we also, out of the Stepping Up programme, we have also developed something called Huruma Women's Programme, which has seen 25 Somali women who have gone through that programme. We've raised their confidence levels, and those women who would normally not have even been within their communities, stay-at-home mothers, we have we've changed their lives according to many of those women, and we're about to kick off the second cohort of Huruma this month. And final slide, please. So what's the mayor's response been to Black Lives Matter? Well, as I said before, the mayor has responded to the toppling of the Colston statue, which we saw as a symbolic demonstration of the city's very complex relationship with race. And as you can see from what I've said before, we've had a very difficult as well as complex relation with race over many, many years. I should know, I've been part of that for the last 35 years. The mayor has given numerous amounts of media interviews. Many of you may or may not have seen them. And also, we've been really proactive as a city through taking the knee. So we asked the city, so instead of marching, to kind of take a knee, take a picture, and we made sure that through our council communications, we asked people to share that on our social media platforms. We've also been having a series of citywide conversations. So the Commission on Race Equality, in fact, this evening, we have our 5th community conversation. So we have been talking to predominantly Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities, refugee and asylum seekers, but we're going to move to a position very soon, having established the Bristol History Commission, where we're going to have a citywide conversation about race and inequality and its place here in this city. The History Commission itself has been stood up to look at the legacy of the transatlantic slave trade and all of the monuments and the places of interest that we have here in the city, and we will take the findings from the Commission into those citywide conversations. And that will be building on the work of a legacy working group that I have been chairing for nearly a year now, which has brought all of the key players in the city together to look at how we really address the issue of the slave trade here in our city. So we have a long way to go. There's a lot that we are doing. And yeah, we've been on this journey for quite some time and there's still a way to go. But I will say that, you know, I personally, with everything that has gone on following the death of George Floyd and obviously the Black Lives Matter kind of movement, you know, I do feel change is coming. We're dealing with a completely different new generation of young people who really, really care about this subject, and they're not going away, and I don't blame them. We've got a lot of work to do, but the city is committed to addressing and tackling race inequality. So there you have it. Thank you so much for listening in.
Thank you, Councillor Craig, for your candor and honesty about where Bristol is and where it would like to be, and reinforcing that building an evidence base with diversity data, making this a collective effort to try and get as many voices in the room, and representation being a key factor in the approach of Bristol has been really enlightening, and we wish you the best of luck and look forward to tracking the progress as we move on. Now I'd like to pass the floor to Ms. Shams Asadi, who has been the Human Rights Commissioner of the Human Rights City, the City of Vienna, since 2015. The Human Rights Office is a part of the city administration and acts as a connecting link between the departments of the city and different organizations to develop new projects to promote human rights and social development. Ms. Asadi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. May I have my PowerPoint presentation? Maybe we could start with that. Yes, thank you. Just many thanks for the invitation. In a few minutes, I'm going to just give you a little bit overview on our just measures that we have undertook within the COVID. But before I go to that part, I want to give you just very brief introduction about Vienna. Next slide, please. Vienna, yes. I'm not going to use the word racial because in our diversity context, we use the diversity just for origin or from the places that people they come in a sort of race. Briefly, just an overview. Vienna is the capital city of Austria and just one of the 9 federal provinces, and with 2.6 million, it is the metropolitan area, and it's about the 1/3 of the whole population of Austria. They live in this area. So Vienna has itself only 1.9 million, and it is more than 1 million. And if you look at the composition of the population, more than 40% of the population, they are born in different countries out of Austria, and even 30% of them, they don't have Austrian citizenship. So it is our diversity concept that Vienna is very diverse. Next slide, please. And if you look at the location of Vienna, Vienna is between Eastern European countries and the EU members. And then Vienna is one of the 4 cities that they host United Nations, and the related organizations of the United Nations, they are also here. And most important for me, for my work, is the settlement of Fundamental Rights Agency as the only human rights agency or just body of the European community, and it is in Vienna. So Vienna has been just in a very tough position in the last years, in the last 10 years, and we really just know that equality and equality measures, and just in the city that anti-discrimination law and regulation, everything that we do for equality measures, it has a huge effect on being the city with high quality of life in the last 10 years. And City of Vienna is member of ICCAR, or better to say ICCAR, the European Coalition of Cities Against Racism, since 2004. 2004 is a milestone for us because in this year, the City of Vienna released the law, anti-discrimination law, and all grounds of just discrimination, they are included in this law. And afterwards, after the amendment of this law, we do have just fine and very clear measures against the discrimination and against the racism. Vienna, last but not least, is a human rights city. After 2 years of process, it became a human rights city in 2014. And since then, we work to fulfillment of a human rights based approach. Next slide, please. What do we mean with human rights based approach? It is an approach that accompanies us since maybe, years, and maybe just 2004, even that, before that. And it means for us to just have the measures and policies and strategies of the city according to this approach. And it is transparency, non-discrimination, participation, and accountability of the city politicians and the city administration level. We create all of our policies and all of our measures that they are in this frame. And non-discrimination is just for us, is the fundament of everything. And we look at the position of the most vulnerable groups in the society and just try to improve the quality of life for this group. I will come back to that. And participation, right to participation is very important. And if there is no just power, we empower the people, or just we use all of our just competence for empower the people for participate. And it all requires just understanding of the human rights culture and awareness raising for human rights. Next slide, please. And then I'm coming to our measures that we undertook. I just selected only 5 of them within the COVID, and just what we have done in this area in the last months. The first one is right to information as a fundamental right of human being and human rights. So we took that, and then just at the beginning of lockdown, maybe it was still mid-March, the City Council of Vienna had a very special meeting, and then during this meeting it was clear that as a highest political level beside the national parliament, we will take the national just goals and just laws, everything into consideration. But as a federal state and as a city, it is our goal to leave no one behind. And according to Right to Information, City of Vienna developed plenty of applications, online and platforms for all citizens, and we developed it in 24 different languages, because access to information is also a human right and it's very important. And it was just including of where can I find the next, I don't know, regional products, or just it came with just services of the City of Vienna, and just it was very basic needs, and people, they could call, they could write, or they could just online, just whatever that the channel that they used to outreach the City of Vienna, it was available and it was possible. The second example is right to education, and beyond the rights of the children, the right to education was fulfilled through just we noticed that how can I just inequality in the society was through COVID more clear and visible. So there are kids in the school that they don't have access to any kind of technical infrastructure like laptop or just Wi-Fi. And the City of Vienna provide these children with 5,000 laptops, and even using Wi-Fi in their areas, just in order to just fulfill the right to education for children that they are not really very well equipped in Corona time for homeschooling. Right to housing as a human right. We just fulfilled the City of Vienna this right with a lot of measures, again, just providing the just shelter that according to the measures for COVID measures for the homeless people from one side, because the City of Vienna just extended the package that it was just only for the winter time, and it just extended the whole year, and then provided with medical care and health and everything the homeless people from one side. From the other side, it was just stop the eviction, just whatever that the reason is, and then just helping the people if they are not able to pay their rent, or just even our mayor tried to appeal to the national level to just in private sector to just evictions that we have to take into consideration that people if they are not able to pay, they stay and they remain in their housing. And of course, the City of Vienna itself, I mean, for April, they, as a landlord, that the City of Vienna has more than 222,000 flats. They stopped to take rent from the inhabitants if they are in need. So the fourth field is right to work, and for right to work, City of Vienna with partners just established a company in order to help the firms and companies that they were in danger that losing their workplaces, in order to save the workplaces, but in order to save the firms and companies in Vienna. So this kind of public-private partnership is not new, but in this area, in this economical area, and in this economical crisis area, it was quite a new and innovative measure. And again, about 5,000 companies and firms, they didn't pay rent, or they got some assistance from the city. And the last point is the just bodily integrity. And bodily integrity of people, it was within the COVID time, the danger that gender-based violence is increasing against women and children. And City of Vienna, as a preventive measure, they increase the staff and the resources of the prevention organizations, and the number of the shelters and number of the housing units for the women or the children that they were in danger of violence. So we have done a lot, but future is full of challenges that still we don't know, but we try to be prepared, and we try to just have all of the human rights in our context, but still knowing that discrimination and inequalities is rising in the society, or just the effect of the right-wing parties and everything. But how could we try to just have a dialogue with everybody in our society is the most important point that City of Vienna takes this way. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Asadi, for sharing with us what a rights-based approach looks like to handling some of the inequality aspects in Vienna, and how you're using that from protecting the body to the mind of children in the city. Now, before we move on to our concluding remarks, I want to remind those that are tuned in To make sure to ask your questions using the question and answer box at the bottom of your screen, so that at the end of this, we can pose some questions to our speakers. Without further ado, I'd like to turn to our final speaker, Mr. Magnus Magnusson, who is the Director for Partnerships and Outreach in the Social and Human Sciences sector at UNESCO. The sector helps to enable member states and communities to create and use knowledge for just and inclusive societies by fostering rights, inclusion, and non-discrimination. The sector also seeks to reinforce linkages among policymakers, the academic and scientific communities, ethnicists, and members of the civil society, among others, to address the contemporary challenges of social transformations. Magnus Magnusson, the floor is yours. Thanks.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I would first like to thank all the panelists and the moderator for the excellent discussion. And thank you also to the OECD for co-organizing this special edition of the webinar with UNESCO, where we've just heard about the different strategies and actions from Bristol and Vienna to promote racial equalities and inclusive cities. And maybe just to add that we've had a number of seminars in the last couple of months that also included other cities. And it is really incredible to hear about the different approaches and strategies in this context. So as we see from the presentations, cities are clearly directly confronting the challenges posed by the pandemic. And this, of course, is being recognized by governments that give cities in many countries rather quite free hands to find solutions and to access resources. In France as much as in other countries. And their role is of primordial importance, of course. They are in a position to provide policy responses and deliver services that have a global impact, as we've seen in the current COVID-19 crisis. Because, of course, it's a global crisis with local specificities. All of the extent of the socioeconomic repercussions of the COVID-19 crisis in minority communities still cannot be determined on a global scale. The pandemic has been disproportionately affecting these populations across the globe. And yesterday I participated at the seminar with the UN Capital Development Fund, who just did a survey on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on small and micro enterprises in the least developed countries. And the outcome of that survey is really alarming in terms of small enterprises suffering and losing their markets and access also to financing, and stalling. Basically 25 to 30% are stalling, and of course the livelihoods that are lost, the employment opportunities that are lost, and these are statistics from the least developed countries. But we've heard some of the statistics also mentioned in the European context, which is of course also very alarming. And if I may, I add a few more just to emphasize the point. So based on the findings of the Centers for Disease Control, the Marshall Project has revealed the effects of COVID-19 in deaths in the US in 2020, and they increased by 35% among Asian Americans and 31% among African Americans. The point was already made earlier. And we see similar statistics from other countries. In addition, the Pew Research Center reported in July 2020 that about 4 in 10 adults in the US say that it has become more common for people to express racist views towards Asians since the pandemic began. And according to the UN FPA, the UN Population Program, in the Latin America and Caribbean region, although the actual number of COVID-19 infections among the Afro-descendant population is not known due to the fact that the epidemiology records available do not include data disaggregated by ethnicity, race, and gender, we see that African descendants are clearly more affected by the pandemic than other communities. And these challenging times have pushed for change in economic, social, and environmental justice, where citizens took their protests to the streets as asking for equal opportunities for all, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement and the I'm Not a Virus movements. We've seen from the examples of many cities, including Bristol and Vienna, that the importance of community building is crucial in finding solutions. But this also requires inclusive governance, which fosters participatory planning and decision-making, which are both very important dimensions. Also, civil society, including media and the private sector, should be part of the dialogues. NGOs, women and youth associations, including health and sports association, academic and scientific communities, media organization and the private sector all have a hand in working with the authorities at all levels. And we've seen great examples of that from these two cities. We also believe that the multi-level governance is a fundamental condition. Regional, national, and local authorities should work hand in hand and not in silos so that policies and actions converge. Data is another primary concern. We saw how the daily statistics of cases and deaths have impacted on the decision-making processes, but also data that is disaggregated or data that is taken into consideration. Minority groups or low-income populations should also be highlighted because this gives policy direction to the authorities and sets the priorities for urgent policy interventions. At UNESCO, we are opening up conversations regarding the social consequences of the pandemic and how it has exacerbated inequalities, discrimination, and marginalization in cities across the world. And this is the same with the OECD, who we work closely with. UNESCO's International Coalition of Inclusive and Sustainable Cities and its European equivalent ICCAR stands strong in its partnership with the OECD Champion Mayors Initiative for Inclusive Growth in analyzing these factors. And we look forward to continuing this partnership. Networks could work as a catalyst for action, encouraging members to share their experiences and good practices, and also raising the profiles of cities' agenda into the global community discourse. And again, I think the exchanges we've had in the last few months through a number of similar seminars have been extremely valuable. And we've made sure to share those lessons learned also broadly through our networks globally, which is one of our roles. I would also like to end with a thought on some of the psychosocial dimension, also the academic dimensions in social psychology. We've done some work at UNESCO together with some of our university networks on what it takes really to decipher the racist and discriminatory tendencies that we've seen, and to understand better where people come from. I think this is a work stream that needs much more attention, and it points, of course, to tendencies that we know are quite universal, that humans tend to be attracted to people that are similar to themselves in whatever form of identity, whether it's professional or other types of identities, like race. And if that's the case, which science seems to point towards, I think it's really important to look at dimensions such as intercultural skills, where we are looking at the opportunities that we offer to particularly young people to be exposed to different cultures, to experience different musical dimensions. Also, actually in a seminar like this, so maybe next time we will actually have some cultural performances that exposes all of us in a seminar to the different types of dimensions of cultures, and maybe even in terms of responses to the current COVID crisis. But I cannot emphasize enough the importance of actually exposing and allowing young people particularly to be exposed to other cultures, other languages, other traditions. And we cannot take it for granted today, but I think we need to make a very, very strong effort to do so. And at the local level, I know there's a lot of efforts. So we stand ready to support the cities as well as our member states. So thank you very much, and look forward to advancing our conversations on how we could jointly create inclusive and just societies in the what we would like to call new normal or next normal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Magnuson, for sharing more about how UNESCO is working with cities to advance on the issue of discrimination and inequality. I'd like to thank everyone for sharing their insights on how to make racial equality in cities happen. I certainly, and I hope you all, feel inspired and re-energized to continue rebuilding more inclusive cities and societies in the COVID era. I want to move to the question and answer portion of the discussion because we've had some questions come in through the chat box. Please don't, through the Q&A box. Please continue to send your questions through. But as we gather them, I'd like to start and ask questions to both Councillor Craig and Ms. Asadi as we move through the presentation. What advice would you give local leaders looking to adapt their cities post-pandemic and support vulnerable communities, including ethnic and racial minorities?
So if I would, I'm happy to kick off. You need to communicate. We need to be having a conversation, okay? If there's one thing that has come out of the pandemic, and the one thing that I'm really proud of that we have done as a city is how we have been communicating with not only all of our citizens, but specifically those communities who are directly impacted by COVID. We have a very, like I said, we've now stood up a COVID-19 race equality group that has over 70, nearly 80 members across that group, all of them broken down into working groups. So we've got members of the communities, trusted members of the communities as well, because that's the other issue as well. There are still a lot of gatekeepers, and we've had to go through and around them so that we can get the messages out to our communities. Because I think that's the other thing. We've over the years, you just get into a habit of talking to the same people all the time. But actually, there's a new generation. There are new voices. They're making their voices heard, and we're quite generous in the local authority that the mayor and myself, our door is open. So we are willing to have those conversations and go out and consult on a regular basis. So, and one of the other things that we're doing as we look at recovery, post-recovery, I've now decided that we can't just, as the powers that be, produce a recovery strategy without the communities themselves being very much a part of that process. And so we're actually in the middle of a deliberative democracy process that will feed into the recovery process. And again, we're being very deliberate in the way in which we target and ensure that the voices of those who have no voice in the democratic processes, or very limited voices, are heard, and their views are going to be a part of that. So we're even modeling a new approach to deliberative democracy that will target those communities.
I would underline just what you told, Asher, but for me also, gaining the trust is very important from the just political level, because people, they need to have trust. And we saw that at the beginning of the COVID-19, that trust is in different communities. And the definition of the most vulnerable group in the society, it changes very rapidly. Sometimes it is the elderly people, and you have to really have measures, very tailor-made measures for this group of the population. Sometimes it is youth, and we notice that homeschooling and just lockdown, and if they don't go out, there is a lot of tensions in the family. So with just to organize a society that people, they have the freedom, though their health is very much in concern of the public, authorities. And of course, we noticed that even one group of the population that completely have been ignored, they are the sex workers, for instance, that within the COVID-19, they had very special situation that even they hadn't something to eat, even, just nourishing, and just food, it was also a huge problem. And we try to organize the city and NGOs and just with the shelter, or just bring them food, basic needs, basic daily needs. And you have to have in mind that in time of crisis, the needs, they could be very, very basic. And we learned that from COVID to really to look at the society with a just loop and to find the vulnerable groups and who needs our help.
Can I just say, Shams, you're absolutely right. If there's one thing that has come out of COVID, is the huge amount of kindness and support that came out from the citizens. People who would not normally speak to each other, people who held very prejudicial and racist views towards other communities. We have Muslim and Sikh communities going out into what could be hostile territory and feeding people, regardless of whatever, because at the end of the day, it's about humanity. So, you know, there's a lot of learning to be done as we work our way through the pandemic.
Well, you certainly answered a few of the questions that came through, which was around culture and changing hearts and minds within the city, breaking down, deconstructing stereotypes and prejudice, and how do you do this, and how can you use the education system to do this?
Yeah, and I think in Bristol, one of the things I didn't say is that we're actually, regardless of the fact that the government has decided that they don't want to change the curriculum and acknowledge the lack of and the absence of our history, the full story, not the half story. So Bristol is developing our own One Bristol curriculum, and we're going to be rolling out a curriculum that actually corrects and informs our children and gives them the full story of Black people's role, white working class people's role. You know, this history commission that we stood up, though we will be starting off with slavery, you know, we have workhouses here, we have the Irish here, you know, there is a lot of history that is hidden in the city because it suited those who ran it before. And so through the commission process, we will be able to tell the true story of many of those communities whose voices and whose stories have been lost.
Yeah. I mean, history is very important, you know. Now, after almost 25 or 30 years that we had the biggest migration wave in Europe because of the war that we had in former Yugoslavia, and about more than 120,000 people, they came to Vienna, and nowadays it is 25 or 28 years that they are here, and there is exhibition just to taking their experiences into consideration, because again, since 2015, we had a wave of migration or refugees in Vienna. So taking the history that, okay, it was in the past, but we have to really take care of the people that now we have here, and then look at the integration measures, look at the educational measures, look at the language capacity, and just work, right to work, and what is their capacity or capacity development for labor market. And these are the discussions that we have for the time being, and COVID helps a little bit because the unemployment is more than ever and more than before, and we know that in Europe after the Second World War it is just the time that we have almost the same unemployment rate.
And I will ask one final question from the participants. In the era of social distancing and using urban innovations and technology to have a relationship with the city and with each other, this has caused, and Ms. Asadi spoke about the lack of technology for certain children while we were social distancing from the schools. How do we start bridging those divides in this era where we can't meet with each other as often?
I think one of the issues that obviously that we have found, because we found ourselves rolling out laptops to many children and families who did not have access, you know, because I think our society just makes all these different assumptions based on where we are and our own privileges. And we seem to forget that there are a set of families and as individuals whose circumstances, you know, we assume that everybody has access to Wi-Fi. They do not. we assume that everybody has a computer or a laptop or an iPad. They don't. Many families have got one iPhone that they're all struggling, and many children were trying to learn off of this one iPhone with intermittent Wi-Fi. So even as a city, we're thinking about, we're a smart city, but we need to be smarter. We need to actually look at, well, how can we make Wi-Fi absolutely free to everybody in the city? Let's look at, our libraries and spaces. We're slowly but surely opening up. But how can we make many of the kind of IT solutions that we have here in the city readily accessible and available? Because we've made a lot of assumptions, and again, COVID has just highlighted just how unequal society is. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and we are on the case on that one.
It's the same with Vienna, and then we noticed that, for instance, children, and you are completely right, with one iPhone in the family, or even without any iPhone, just we try to recognize which families or which children they don't have any access, and then we got to this fact through the schools and through the multiplicators, and distributed the laptops over them. But we noticed that even if there is laptop and iPad and just whatever, and if even Wi-Fi, there is a lot of know-how they need in order to get to the educational system. And the school authorities, they just establish a kind of hub, educational hub, for teachers, for parents, for children, in order to get some online support for their school materials. And we noticed that in the just residential areas for elderly people, even this know-how is not, is the lack of the know-how is there just very much. And we try to bring through the staff of this senior or just residents, that they bring the just iPhone or whatever in order to get contact with the families, and just teach them and have iPad, iPhone, or just whatever in their workplaces. So there is still a lot to do. City of Vienna is a smart city, and digitalization is a very important fact here, but still, not everybody in the society have the access.
Well, I'd like to thank all the speakers for joining us today. We are at time. I'd also like to thank the organizers of the SHS webinar series and the Champion Mayors Initiative, the OECD Champion Mayors team, for organizing this event, and for all the participants coming in and asking your questions. Do not forget to, at the end of this, as we conclude, you'll receive a questionnaire. Please fill it out. Let us know what you think of this series and what you'd like to hear. This is the 15th edition, and there will be more. So please help us shape the future of this series. I thank you, Councillor Asher, Ms. Asadi, Mr. Magnuson, for your time today, and all of you for tuning in.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Particularly to the speakers. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.